Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take fascinating sources, really dig into them, and pull out the most important insights, basically giving you a shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're diving deep into an absolute masterpiece, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking, Fast and Slow. I mean, this book isn't just an international bestseller. Kahneman himself, he got a Nobel Prize in economics. That tells you just how impactful his work is. It's resonated so widely, across psychology, finance, even public policy. It's huge.
Oh, absolutely. It's way more than just scientifically robust, though it definitely is that. As one reviewer put it, it's intellectually provoking and so rich with intelligent analysis, but also touching.
Yeah.
And our mission today really is to unpack why it's so powerful. Why does it resonate like that? And how does it fundamentally change the way, we understand our own minds, our decisions, even our memories? It's truly a seminal work. It's basically reshaped how we view human rationality, seriously challenging that old idea that we're primarily logical beings.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to explore the surprising ways we actually think, how we make decisions, especially under pressure, and why we sometimes make these seemingly irrational choices, even when we're convinced, absolutely convinced, we're being perfectly logical and in control. Get ready for some serious aha moments, because this deep dive, well, it's designed to make you question maybe every snap judgment you've ever made and understand the hidden forces shaping your daily life. It's fascinating stuff. Okay, let's unpack this then. The very foundation of Kahneman's groundbreaking work, this concept of two distinct systems of thinking. It's kind of like discovering your brain has a manual mode and an autopilot. And they're constantly interacting. Sometimes they work together beautifully, and other times they just trip each other up. Before Kahneman, I think we often thought of the mind as, one single rational thing, but he really breaks it down into these two distinct, powerful forces, each with its own quirks and pitfalls.
And what's really fascinating here is how Kahneman manages to simplify these incredibly complex psychological, even neurological processes. He boils it down to these two approachable ideas, System 1 and System 2. It's brilliant in its clarity, really. By giving them these simple names, he makes our whole cognitive architecture much more digestible, more understandable for everyone. Not just academics, but, the casual reader, too. It's a remarkable feat of popular science, turning decades of pretty dense research into accessible wisdom that directly applies to our everyday lives.
Okay, so let's start with System 1. This is your brain's autopilot, right? It's intuitive, rapid-fire reaction machine. It operates automatically, super quickly, with little or no conscious effort. And this is key. No sense of voluntary control. It's our intuition, our gut feelings, those snap judgments we make every second without even realizing it. It's like the brain's default mode, right? Always on, always processing, constantly generating impressions and suggestions.
Exactly. System 1 is constantly working away, processing just a vast amount of information below the level of conscious awareness, often doing multiple things at once, in parallel. For example, System 1 is what lets you instantly detect that, say, one object is more distant than another. You don't do any calculations.
Right.
It's why you immediately turn towards a sudden loud sound. You don't consciously think, I should investigate that noise. It just happens. It's also at play when you complete common phrases like bread, and
butter,
or salt,
pepper. Yeah.
Or when you understand a simple sentence like the sky is blue. Even driving a car on an empty, familiar road where you're not actively thinking about every single turn or pedal press that's System 1, it's guiding you with learned patterns, automatic responses. It's incredibly efficient, and like you said, it's constantly generating suggestions for System 2 to either endorse or sometimes override. It's the engine of our associative memory, effortlessly connecting ideas, experiences, feelings.
That makes so much sense. It's the part of our brain that just knows without thinking. The source of those quick insights or instantaneous reactions, like, how you instantly know the answer to 2 + 2 is 4, or how you react to a sudden loud noise, you jump back or flinch without even making a conscious decision. That's System 1 in full, immediate action. It's the instinctual, effortless part of our mind handling the vast majority of our daily processing, which lets System 2 conserve its precious resources for the harder stuff.
And Kahneman provides these brilliant, really simple demonstrations that make System 1's power undeniable. You can't argue with them. Consider this classic example he uses to show how System 1 works with context, how it automatically matches patterns. Imagine seeing a sequence of figures, 12, 13, 14, written down.
Okay.
Your brain, without any conscious effort, immediately interprets that middle figure as the number 13. You don't have to pause, analyze, deduce. It just happens automatically, thanks to the numerical context, the 12 and 14.
Right. That's just so immediate you don't even think about it. It just is 13 because of the numbers around it. It's a quick, effortless perception.
Yeah, precisely. But now imagine if you saw ABC written down.
Yeah.
And in the middle, that exact same shape, that 13 figure, maybe rotated slightly, your system 1 would effortlessly interpret it as the letter B.
Whoa, okay. Same shape, different meaning.
It's the identical visual input. Yet your mind automatically assigns a completely different meaning based entirely on the surrounding alphabetical context. This just highlights System 1's incredible ability to quickly make sense of the world, to fill in the gaps, operate efficiently, often without us even realizing the subtle biases or assumptions it's making. It shows how profoundly context can, re-engineer our immediate perception, even with ambiguous stuff. And it's not just about mental interpretation either. Kahneman also explored the physical tells of cognitive effort, showing that our thinking processes aren't entirely internal and invisible. Think about physiological responses. Research, including work by Kahneman and his colleagues, shows that pupil dilation, the widening of our eye pupils, that's often a very clear unconscious physiological sign of increased mental exertion.
Okay, this is where it gets truly fascinating for me. Because when our pupils dilate, it's like our brain is demanding more light or maybe more energy to process something difficult. It's a literal, measurable window into our cognitive load, a direct physiological reflection of the brain's energy consumption. That's wild.
Exactly. When your pupils are narrow, it often corresponds to easy, automatic tasks. Things that require little System 2 engagement stuff your System 1 can handle easily, like simple recall or a basic addition problem. Conversely, wider pupils indicate a higher cognitive load. It signals that System 2 is engaged and working hard. So when you're solving a complex math problem or trying to remember a long string of numbers or wrestling with a tricky moral dilemma, your pupils will likely dilate. It's a physiological demonstration of the brain's energy consumption during different thought processes. It shows us that thinking isn't just some abstract activity. It has a very real, measurable physical cost. And this cost is something System 2 is always trying to minimize.
Okay, so if System 1 is the autopilot, then System 2 is the manual mode, the slow, deliberate, and effortful thinker. This system allocates attention to those mental activities that truly demand it, right? Like complex computations. It's the part of us that feels like me, associated with that subjective experience of agency, choice, and intense concentration. It's where willpower lives, basically, where we consciously choose to focus and maybe override our immediate impulses.
Yes, System 2 is what kicks in when System 1's automatic response isn't enough, or when a task is too novel, too complex, or requires a logical sequence of steps. Examples would be like focusing your attention in a crowded room to pick out a specific voice, or searching your memory for some surprising fact you learned years ago, comparing two complex products before you buy something, or solving a difficult math problem like, say, 17 by 24. You can literally feel the gears turning, the effort involved, that System 2 flexing its muscles, consuming your limited cognitive resources. It's central to working memory, letting us hold and manipulate information actively.
And there's a real cost to operating System 2, isn't there? It's not just about time, it's about mental energy, like a finite resource that can actually get depleted.
Absolutely. Kahneman highlights that System 2 is, in a way, lazy. It prefers to conserve energy because mental energy and attention are very much limited resources. You can only sustain intense System 2 activity for so long before you feel mentally fatigued. It's that phenomenon sometimes called ego depletion or decision fatigue.
Right. I've heard of that.
Yeah. This is why multitasking is so difficult, or why we often take the path of least cognitive resistance. Think of that classic example of a judge who's more likely to grant parole right after lunch than right before a break. It's suggested it's because their System 2 resources are replenished. Our brains are built for efficiency, and System 2 is the high-energy consumption mode we tend to avoid unless absolutely necessary. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, our internal state, especially our mood, significantly impacts how System 1 and System 2 interact, and how effectively System 2 can even do its job. Kahneman discusses how a positive emotional state can sort of foster an environment where System 1 is more confident maybe and System 2 is less vigilant. Consider the implications of being in a good mood, or Susanna Hadi Bake, as it's shown in some of the source material images, versus being stressed out.
So wait, being in a positive mood actually makes us more receptive, more open to new ideas almost by design. That's fascinating. I always thought mood just affected how you feel, not how you think or process information at such fundamental cognitive level.
Precisely. When we're in a good mood, our System 1 might be less challenged by contradictory information. Or maybe our System 2 is just less vigilant in scrutinizing new ideas. This means we might be more open to persuasion, less critical of novel concepts, generally more trusting. Think about how much easier it is to be convinced of something or accept a new proposition when you're feeling happy and relaxed versus when you're stressed, anxious, or irritable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Conversely, stress or a bad mood can deplete System 2's precious resources. That makes us more reliant on System 1's potentially biased shortcuts, or it can make us more rigid, less willing to consider alternative viewpoints. It really underscores how our emotional state isn't just a fleeting feeling, it's a powerful cognitive lever. It directly influences our rationality, our openness to new information, our decision-making capacity. It's a profound reminder that our mental resources aren't infinite, and our emotional state literally shapes our cognitive landscape.
Wow. Okay, so the interaction between these two systems is where things get really interesting and often where the trouble starts, I guess. System 1 is constantly offering up impressions, intuitions, intentions, feelings. It's like this tireless suggestion box. And if System 2, our more deliberate self, endorses these suggestions, they become our beliefs and voluntary actions. It sounds like a pretty seamless partnership when it works well.
That's right, when it works well. The problem is, while System 1 is incredibly efficient, it also has these inherent biases, systematic errors. It's built for speed and coherence, you see, for constructing compelling stories, not necessarily for accuracy or logic in every single situation. Now, System 2 can intervene, it can override these impulses, it's capable of rational analysis and self-correction, but, and this is a big but, it often doesn't.
Right, too lazy or too busy.
Exactly. This failure to intervene can be due to System 2 being lazy, like we discussed, preferring to conserve energy, or simply being preoccupied with other demanding tasks. And this dynamic is precisely what leads to that whole myriad of common cognitive biases that Kahneman and Tversky meticulously cataloged. They showed how often our intuitive judgments just veer away from true rationality. For instance, consider the anchoring effect. When System 1 encounters an initial piece of information, even if it's totally irrelevant, it anchors our subsequent judgments around it. And System 2, often being lazy, just fails to sufficiently adjust away from that anchor.
So like the first price you hear sets the stage, even if it's crazy.
Totally. Or the availability heuristic. System 1 judges how frequent or likely something is by how easily examples come to mind. This leads us to overemphasize vivid, easily recalled information, even if it's not representative.
Okay. Like why we might fear plane crashes more than car accidents, right? Because the crashes are so vivid on the news.
Exactly. Even though the statistics tell a completely different story, System 1 grabs the vivid image.
Okay, that's a perfect lead-in to how we make decisions, especially when there's risk and uncertainty involved. Because here's where it gets really compelling. It turns out our intuitive assessment of probabilities is anything but rational. We don't just calculate the odds, we sort of feel them. And those feelings distort our judgment in predictable, often illogical ways. This insight alone has had massive implications, especially in fields like economics. It really challenged its very foundations.
Well, it raises that critical question. Are we truly rational when faced with uncertainty? Classical economic theory often assumed we are. That we evaluate risks and rewards in a linear, logical fashion, making choices to maximize, expected utility. But Kahneman's work, particularly his development of prospect theory with Amos Tversky, completely revolutionized our understanding of economic decision-making. They demonstrated that we are systematically irrational in our probabilistic judgments. Our decisions aren't based on objective probabilities, but on decision weights, which are like a psychological transformation of those probabilities. Consider this concept of nonlinear probability weighting. If we're perfectly rational, perfectly linear in our thinking, you'd expect a 10% chance to have a decision weight of 10, right? 50% chance of weight of 50, and so on. Seems obvious. But look at the data Kahneman and Tversky presented. For instance, in some of their tables, maybe like that table 1.4 referenced, showing Plewon% probability versus Babak-Kaputasan decision weight.
Yeah, looking at that kind of data, it just visually screams how nonlinear our thinking is. 1% chance, which is tiny, might get assigned a decision weight of like 5.5. That's massively higher than its actual probability. It's like our System 1 blows up these tiny possibilities into something far more significant. And then on the flip side, an 80% chance might only be weighted at, say, 60.1. That's a huge downgrade from its actual probability. It's like our brain stretches the small probabilities and shrinks the large ones. It's weird.
This is a core finding of prospect theory. People consistently overweigh small probabilities and underweigh moderate to high probabilities. It's a fundamental distortion. This explains phenomena like why people buy lottery tickets. They overweigh that tiny chance of a huge win. It makes that minuscule probability feel much more significant and enticing than it truly is. The vividness of the jackpot, however improbable, makes System 1 just seize on it.
Right, the dream is powerful.
And it also explains why people buy insurance. They overweigh the small chance of a catastrophic loss. It makes the fear of that unlikely event feel more pressing and worth protecting against. We don't perceive probabilities linearly in our minds. Instead, our intuitive system exaggerates the extremes. And this psychological distortion drastically affects our choices, often leading us to make decisions that, from a purely statistical standpoint, are, well, suboptimal. It's not about what the numbers are, but what they feel like, driven by System 1's associative and emotional responses.
And it's not just probabilities either. Kahneman showed that how a choice is presented, how it's framed, significantly impacts our decisions, even if the underlying objective outcome is exactly the same. It's like changing the label on a medicine bottle from 90% effective to 10% failure rate. The information is identical, but your reaction is totally different, right? It triggers different System 1 responses.
Yes, exactly. And that simple idea, illustrated perhaps by an image like Menorima 50 pounds, receive 50 pounds, points to another fundamental aspect of prospect theory. We evaluate outcomes not as absolute states of wealth, but as gains or losses relative to a reference point. This reference point could be our current situation, our expectations, or maybe what we consider fair. What matters isn't just the absolute amount, but whether it feels like a gain or a loss from where we are right now. This relative evaluation is absolutely key to understanding our choices. Kahneman and Tversky illustrate this with their famous value function, which is S-shaped. It shows diminishing sensitivity to both gains and losses as they get bigger. So, receiving 50 pounds feels good, a clear gain. But losing 50 pounds feels much, much worse than the pleasure of gaining 50 pounds. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's not symmetrical. The pain of loss outweighs the joy of gain.
Exactly. That is precisely loss aversion. The psychological impact of a loss is roughly twice as powerful as the psychological impact of an equivalent gain. Think about it in your own life. Finding 50 pounds on the street feels good, right?
But losing 50 pounds out of your wallet feels significantly worse, even though the monetary amount is the same. This inherent asymmetry deeply influences our choices. It often makes us risk-averse when it comes to securing gains. We tend to prefer a sure gain over a potentially larger but risky one. We lock in the win.
Okay.
But paradoxically, it makes us risk-seeking when it comes to avoiding losses. If we're already facing a loss, we're suddenly more willing to take a big gamble to try and get back to even if that gamble carries a high risk of making things even worse.
Like doubling down when you're losing.
Precisely. It's why people hold on to losing stocks for way too long, hoping they'll just break even, or why companies might take really drastic measures to avoid a perceived setback in their market share. This single insight, loss aversion, profoundly shifts our understanding of risk-taking behavior in everything from financial markets to personal health decisions. It even explains why negotiation tactics often focus on what the other side stands to lose rather than what they stand to gain. It's incredibly powerful.
Wow. So, what does this all mean when we look back, when we reflect on our past? How do we remember experiences, especially things like pain or pleasure? Because it turns out our memory plays some pretty significant tricks on us too. And these tricks aren't random. They follow predictable patterns that really influence our future choices.
What's so fascinating here is precisely how our memory distorts reality, and how these distortions then go on to affect our future choices and our overall satisfaction with life, really. Kahneman introduced this critical distinction between the experiencing self and the remembering self. The experiencing self lives in the moment. It feels the pain or pleasure as it happens second by second, recording the raw sensory data of an experience. The remembering self, however, is the one that constructs and stores the story of the past experience for future recall. And this storyteller, well, it has its own powerful biases. It often selectively edits the narrative, focusing on certain parts and ignoring others.
Okay, let's consider those fascinating graphs Kahneman uses, the ones for patient A and patient B. These graphs show two different pain experiences over time, right? So imagine patient A has a shorter period of pain, maybe a medical procedure that lasts, say, 10 minutes. Their pain starts low, rises to a peak maybe around the middle, then dips slightly before rising to a second, even higher peak, and then ends relatively quickly. Now, patient B experiences pain for a significantly longer duration, let's say 20 minutes. Their pain also has multiple ups and downs, but maybe it never reaches the absolute peak intensity of patient A. But crucially, maybe patient B's pain ends at a relatively high pain level. The final moments are quite unpleasant.
This is a classic demonstration of the peak-end rule. When people retrospectively rate an experience, whether it's pain, pleasure, a movie, a vacation, anything, Their overall evaluation is heavily influenced by just two moments: the peak, the most intense moment, highest pain or highest pleasure, and the end of the experience. The duration of the experience, surprisingly, has very little impact on how it's remembered. So the total amount of pain or pleasure accumulated over time matters far less than the intensity at its worst or best moment and how it all concludes.
Wait, so even if patient B experienced more overall pain just because their ordeal lasted for a much longer duration, their remembered pain might not actually reflect that total cumulative suffering. It could even be remembered as less painful than patient A's, depending on those peaks and ends. This is truly counterintuitive, seriously.
Precisely. If patient A's peak pain was higher, or if patient B's pain, despite lasting longer, ended on a higher, more unpleasant note than patient A's, then patient B's experience might actually be remembered as worse or more unpleasant, even if the total suffering duration for B was significantly longer. This fundamentally challenges that intuitive idea that we remember the sum total of our experiences, or that longer suffering is automatically remembered as worse. Instead, our remembering self is this highly selective storyteller. It focuses disproportionately on the highlights or lowlights and the conclusion, and largely ignores the rest of the narrative arc and its actual duration. It's a profound trick of the mind.
That's incredibly powerful when you think about the relevance. This has huge implications for how we design everything. From medical procedures, where minimizing the peak pain and ensuring a gentle ending is maybe more crucial than shortening it slightly,
Right,
to customer service experiences, and even how we plan vacations. Imagine a great customer service call that just goes south right at the very end. That negative ending might totally overshadow an otherwise helpful interaction. You know, that slightly annoying flight or rough patch in the middle of a trip won't matter nearly as much if the peak moments, like a stunning view from a mountain, are incredible, and the ending, like a delicious farewell dinner, is positive. Ending on a good note can truly salvage an otherwise mediocre or even unpleasant experience, because that's what the remembering self will cling to.
Absolutely. It also suggests that when we reflect on our lives, we might be disproportionately influenced by certain peak moments, both good and bad, and how things eventually wrapped up in different phases. And beyond these specific examples, the systems, the biases, the memory quirks, Kahneman consistently shows us a broader truth. Our minds are constantly trying to make sense of the world, often by creating coherent stories, even when the data isn't fully there or is maybe even contradictory. This quest for narrative coherence is a hallmark of System 1. It's its default mode of operation.
It's like our brain just can't stand ambiguity or gaps in the story, so it just fills them in, sometimes with plausible but not necessarily accurate information, which leads us to believe in things that aren't fully supported by the actual evidence.
Exactly. Our System 1 is fundamentally a coherence-seeking engine. It jumps to conclusions. It constructs narratives based on whatever information is available, even if that information is limited, biased, or incomplete. This inherent drive for coherence is why we're susceptible to various effects, where initial information can disproportionately influence later judgment, even if that initial information is irrelevant or misleading. This is also famously known as the "what you see is all there is" bias, or Wyesiati. System 1 confidently operates only on the information it has immediately available. It fails to consider what might be missing, or what alternative explanations could exist. And this leads to overconfidence and a real blind spot for our own ignorance. You might see this illustrated sometimes by, like, a graph. Maybe one with a curve peaking sharply at a central point, say 0, and then decaying outwards as you move way along the x-axis. While the specific context might vary, this visual pattern often beautifully illustrates phenomena like anchoring bias. Imagine you're negotiating the price of a house. The very first number mentioned, even if it's absurdly high or low, becomes an anchor. Our System 1, in its quest for coherence and a quick answer, just latches onto this anchor and adjusts from there.
So even if that anchor is completely arbitrary, it significantly sways our final estimate. That's pretty wild to think about. It means the first number thrown out, even in just a casual conversation, can subconsciously dictate the entire negotiation that follows.
Precisely. The strong peak at that central point, the anchor, shows the significant weight our System 1 gives to this initial piece of information, and how that influence might taper off the further you move from it. System 2 might try to adjust, but research shows it rarely adjusts enough. And this applies way beyond negotiations. It influences how juries set damages in court cases, how much we're willing to pay for products, even how we estimate the likelihood of events. Another example of System 1's coherence seeking is confirmation bias. System 1 is prone to seek out and interpret information in a way that confirms its existing beliefs. It makes us less likely to notice or properly evaluate evidence that contradicts them. This makes our constructed stories feel much more robust and accurate than they might actually be.
So we're not just passive receivers of information at all. We're active, often biased interpreters. And those interpretations are shaped not just by objective facts, but by these deep-seated cognitive tendencies and the powerful, effortless operations of our System 1. It really makes you realize how much of our reality is constructed by our own minds, often without our conscious awareness or consent. It's both humbling, I think, and also empowering to understand this.
Well, that's it for today's deep dive into Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. We really hope this conversation gave you something profound to think about. Not just about the human mind in general, but about your own mind specifically. Understanding these two systems, how we weigh probabilities, how our memory selectively functions, why we seek coherence, it can truly transform how you see your own decisions, the decisions of others, and really the world around you. It's foundational knowledge for navigating complexity in an increasingly noisy world, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. It's about developing an awareness, isn't it? An awareness of these unseen forces at play in our minds. It's not about trying to be perfectly rational all the time. I mean, Kahneman himself would tell you that's impossible and would be utterly exhausting. But it's about recognizing when your fast thinking, your System 1, might be leading you astray. And when it's wise to maybe pause and engage your slower, more deliberate System 2, it's about building a better intuition, really, one that's informed by understanding these biases, making small but significant improvements in how we approach the crucial decisions.
And maybe to leave you with a provocative thought. How might being in a good mood subtly influence an important decision you make today? Could it be making you more open to an idea you might otherwise scrutinize more carefully? Or conversely, how might a negative mood inadvertently close you off to a potentially beneficial, albeit challenging option? Think about the profound yet often invisible implications of your emotional state on your cognitive state, and how just knowing this might change your approach to life's big choices. Something to chew on.
Definitely something to chew on. Stay curious and keep diving deep with us next time.